hello there, wherever you're listening, however you're listening, streaming us live on the Reality Aftershow YouTube channel, or what I believe is working, what I hope is working, is the very first episode on X. Yes, if you're watching on Twitter, on the Twitter live stream, let me know if it's working out. If you're here on YouTube, please leave comments in the comments section. Let us know what you're thinking, what you're feeling about tonight's episode. We already got a comment coming in on the Twitter live stream from my main man, Sam Phelan. Nashville in the house by way of Chicago. So good to see you here, brother. So it sounds like the X stream is working. I did have to subscribe to X Premium, so I will have a blue check next to my name. Will it be a mark of shame or will it change the game? We will have to wait and see. If you're joining us on either live stream, the comment section is clearly open, as you can see here. So go ahead, leave your comments in the comments section. If you want to roast me in the comments section. If you want to praise me or praise the great work that we do here on the Reality After Show by way of Gabe's big move, please go ahead and let me know. We'll have some Q&A at the end of the show, as well as we do every single week here on Gabe's big move. So please leave any questions you have, whether it's about the topic of the show tonight or about anything Survivor related. It can be about my time on 47. It can be about season 50. It can be whatever you want to talk about. We always try to leave time at the end for a little Q&A. So be sure to get your questions in throughout the show. Also, tonight at around 7:35, we're going to be joined by the very first guest in the history of Gabe's big move, and I cannot wait for that. So be sure to stick around. I won't tell you who it is. You got to tune in to find out. What I will tell you is it's somebody that I played Survivor with on Survivor 47. So really, really excited for that. Want to get into the theme of tonight's episode. And it's how, and you can see in the title if you're tuning in on YouTube, I think you can see the title as well on Twitter. Also, the hair is out tonight. Saw a comment there. Yes, the hair is out tonight for the first time in Gabe's big move. But how COVID changed Survivor. And I'm not talking about the new era. I'm not talking about we went from 39 days to 26 days. No, I'm talking about how COVID and specifically binge watching changed how fans participate and take in the show, and how I believe it's gone so far as to change the way that contestants play the show, play the game on the show of Survivor. And so I think we have to break down the two different groups that we're talking about here before we can really answer this question, right? Those two groups would be folks who grew up with the show, or folks who watch the show week to week as it's coming out, and folks who discovered the show very late into its lifespan. Many of them during COVID, when binge watching became, the national pastime, and just watch episode after episode, season after season, back to back to back to back. So let's break down these groups real quick. And before we do that, got a question. What other platforms are you streaming on? Right now, just Twitter and the Reality After Show channel on YouTube. So go check out both. I would say if you want to watch on YouTube, it's probably a little bit better for the algorithm so that the show can keep growing. We can bring you more cool, exciting content and interviews. But if you're watching on Twitter, that's fine too. We love you all the same here at the Reality After Show. So let's break down these two groups here. Folks who grew up with the show and folks who found the show late in their lifespan, many of them during COVID, and binge watched the entire series up until now season 48, where we are now. People who grew up with this show, watching it week to week is a drastically different experience than binge watching. And this applies to all shows, right? This isn't just Survivor. But Survivor is unique in this aspect, because the people that watch the show get to go participate on the show, assuming you're lucky enough to go get casted. And also, it's a game. And because it's a game, it changes and it evolves over time. And watching that happen in real time is very different than watching all those different evolutions take place over the span of a couple months of you catching up on all 48 seasons. When you watch a big moment happen and you're watching it week to week, you have to sit with that for a whole week, 7 days. You have to sit with what you just watch and you have to process it. And, this also extends to entire seasons, where if you watch a season that changes the course of how the game is played, right? Whether it's heroes versus villains, whether it's Kagayan, you can take your pick, whatever you want it to be. You have to sit with that season for months until you can move on to something else. And not only are you sitting with it yourself, but also whatever form of survivor community you have is all doing the same thing, week to week, season to season. And this is very important because whether you just watch Survivor with your parents and those are the only people you talk to about it, or whether you have one friend at your school or at your job, and that's the only person who you talk to Survivor about, or if you're very deep in the community and you're on live Reddit threads as the episode's coming out and you spend the entire next day posting and commenting theories on Reddit of what's going to happen next, or if you're deep in Twitter talking with whatever communities you have out there in a virtual space about what you just watched, whether it's one episode or whether it's a full season, you are forced to develop your own perspective on what you just watched. And not only your own perspective on what you just watched, but you're also then forced to engage with other people's perspectives. And they may disagree with you. They may differ from what you think you just saw or what you just watched. And this is very important because if you are somebody that is taking in a lot of different takes, and again, not to kill this word, but perspectives on what just happened, it's going to mold the way you see this. And you're going to see it from a lot of different angles. And this is happening in live time. Everybody watched this together. Now everybody's talking about it together. And this week to months long discussion that you're having around whatever you just watched, whatever episode you just watched, whatever season you just watched, it develops your own perspective by having to take in different ones from around you. I mean, one of the best things you can have in life, in my opinion, is somebody who disagrees with you, because it forces you to look at things from a different angle. And Survivor is no different. When you're in your Reddit thread, you may think that somebody just made a great move. And you may have somebody else who thinks they made a terrible move. And the beauty of watching it week to week is that neither one of you knows who's actually right until you get to that next episode. And so you're constantly batting back and forth between your head of like, well, I think it's right because of this. This person's telling me I'm wrong because of this. Well, maybe they're right here, but I really think that I'm right here. And I see their point here, but I disagree with their point here. And all of that, by the time you get to next week's episode, your opinion, maybe in small ways, maybe in big ways, has probably changed from when you first watched it, because you had to sit with it for so long and you had to see and read and listen to so many different perspectives of what you just watched. And it molds you. It molds your opinion. It molds your perspective on the game. And perhaps in some cases, changes the way you watch the show and perceive the game entirely. This develops a significantly deeper understanding of what transpired on the show. Now, let's look at the other side of this equation. People who binge the show. And again, many of these people during COVID. Every episode that you watch is immediately followed by the next episode. And you don't really indulge in the gameplay that you just watched. You only see the aftermath. And if you watch a full season, you don't sit with the totality of the 12, 13, 14, 15 episodes that you just took in, hours of gameplay and content. You're immediately on to the next season. Oh, wow, that was crazy. Episode 1, next season. And I think that one of the beautiful things about a lot of these COVID era fans who binge watched many, many seasons of the show that then go on to get casted on the show is that it is a new kind of contestant, right? I mean, they've had super fans for a while. They've had recruits for a while, people who barely even knew what Survivor was, and They just seem like an interesting person that Lynn Spillman or anybody ran into on the street and said, hey, you would be great for our show. But this generation of fans that are super fans of Survivor, but took in the whole series within a few months, is a relatively new thing. And it is something that has allowed casting and allowed producers and allowed Jeff and Jesse Tannenbaum to mix up people's approach to the game. And I think one of the biggest differences between fans who watch week to week, fans who grew up with the show, and fans who binge watch the show is that for fans who binge watch the show that then get casted onto the show and get to go play, they're very hyper about everything that they do. They're very, very hyper about everything that they do because to them, Survivor has never been a long haul. It's a game of cause and immediate effect, right? Wow, I just saw Russell find an idol without a clue for the first time. That was crazy. Let's start the next episode. I get to see the immediate effect of that. And I really believe in my heart of hearts that that is how players casted from that pool of fans goes out and plays the game. They expect a cause and an immediate effect to follow. When in reality, and this is something that I think many fans don't know because it doesn't show itself on TV, is that there's a lot of not just downtime on Survivor, but a lot of nothing happening, right? Like hours go by where you might go to a challenge and you win or you lose that challenge. And then you have hours until you have to go to tribal council or until the next day starts if you don't have to go to tribal and you do whatever the next day holds for you. And like that is something that I see these COVID era binge watching players get very antsy about. And it's like, okay, well, we just won the challenge. Now something needs to happen. Like, well, something's got to happen here. Okay, we're all just hanging out and sitting around like, no, I got to go scramble, right? Because that's what happens every episode that I watch on Survivor is people go and they scramble after a challenge happens, even if they win. And it's like, whoa, maybe you just have to sit with what just happened for a little bit. Maybe it's better to just kind of take in the different perspectives from people around you and see how they're all reacting to it. And allow that to mold your perspective and your opinion of what your next move is going to be. And I do believe that that is a symptom of people who watch the show week to week and say, you know what? I'm not going to get immediate gratification or immediate stimulus off of the last thing that just took place. That is a critical aspect to any great Survivor player. And I'm not saying that there aren't players who found the game during COVID and binge watch all the seasons and decided to apply and made it on and did quite well. I don't know where many of these players, especially since 2020, so pretty much all the new era, I don't know what camps many of them fall into. We got a super chat here from Stuart Arbery. This type of player had a whole bucket list of things they want to do. I love Survivor, and if I'm ever on, there's one thing on my list: win. I mean, you got to respect that, right? If you want to have your comment thrown up here as soon as it gets sent in, you can send in a super chat just like Stuart did. Thank you so much for the super chat. All of us here at the Reality After Show appreciate you, Stuart, with one of the best presidents as his logo as well, Teddy Roosevelt. But getting back to the topic at hand here. Many of these players are so hyper and they are so ready to see something happen after they just did whatever they did, whether it's win a challenge, whether it's find an idol, whether it's develop an alliance, whether it's instigate a blindside in camp, whatever it may be. And I think that comes from the idea of I just saw Parvati scheme on somebody and the episode ended. And the very next episode, I turned on seconds afterwards and I get to see the fallout from that scheming from Parvati. Like that to your brain is an immediate effect following a cause. But if you're watching it week to week, it doesn't quite work like that. It's, oh, I saw Parvati scheming at the end of last episode. I wonder what the fallout from that is going to be, and I have to wait 7 days to get that answer. So I have to ponder this. I have to sit here and I have to wonder, is she going to get caught? Is she going to get the person that she wants out of the game? Well, I think A is going to happen. And I hear from somebody else, they think B is going to happen. So now all of a sudden, you have to combat within your own mind all the different outcomes that could come into play here. And it's a very, very, very formative experience for many Survivor fans. Going through that week-long period and having to figure out who's right and who's wrong with all the predictions and theories that you've made over the past 7 days. And then again, we can extend this conversation to full seasons as well. When you watch Cagayan for the first time, and you watch a player like Tony, and you watch a player like Spencer, and you watch a player like Cass all go at it together and all bring these different approaches to the game, many of which we've never seen before they made it out to the island. And after the season, you spend months personally dissecting it and dissecting it amongst other members of this Survivor community. And you have a very well-developed perspective and opinion and insight on what Cagayan meant to the game of Survivor and how it changed the trajectory of the show and how it changed the approach of many players that will come after that season. But if you finish Cagayan for the first time and you're immediately starting the next season after that, you're like, wow, Tony was crazy and Spencer was wild and Cass was chaotic. Okay, next season, here we go. And it's not sitting with you. Your brain isn't processing what you just saw because it's already being stimulated by the next fresh set of faces to hit the island. And my next guest might know what the next season of Survivor was after Cagayan. I'm going to be totally honest. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Chat, let me know. What was the first season after Cagayan? I can't quite remember, but I know somebody who will. So I'm very excited to bring in the very first guest in the history of Gabe's Big Move, the young history of Gabe's Big Move. Very, very excited for this. We're going to get his perspective on everything we're talking about right now. We're also going to talk a little bit about Survivor 50, which I'm excited about. I haven't heard publicly this person put out their opinion on Survivor 50, and there's a whole lot that we can dissect about that. But first, let's tackle the topic at hand. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce the inaugural guest of Gabe's Big Move, the one and only, from season 47, Teeny. How we doing, friend?
Hello. Is this thing on? Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you loud and clear. Don't worry. So first off, thank you so much for making some time for me today. This is something that I always knew I was going to do, that Teeny was going to be the very first guest of my show whenever it got started. And I wanted to get some episodes under my belt. You know, I wanted this to be Gabe's Big Move. I didn't want it to just be who's the guest of the week. But I can't not have guests on a show like this. And it is so satisfying to have Teeny Chinchilla on the show here with me. Teeny, how we doing today?
I'm doing so good. I couldn't be more honored to be your first guest. I mean, for those who don't know, one of the stories out about our season that I love the most is when Gabe was able to get me completely enthralled of the politics of local Baltimore, which is not a topic I would particularly be interested in. But this man just has a way with words. He has the gift of gab, and he's always got something really cool to say. So I love talking to you about everything, but especially Survivor. And I'm glad to be here. Also, my roommate just got a dog. So
Wow. A scruffy little guy. What's his name?
her name is Bunny.
Her name is Bunny, a very, very scruffy bunny to welcome into your home. Wow.
Yes.
How has the living situation changed since Bunny has entered?
Honestly, like only in wonderful ways. She is
Yeah,
incredibly like low maintenance. She's incredibly affectionate. We have heard her bark maybe one time. But she's I'm sure still adjusting. So day by day comes out of her shell a bit more, and it's just nice to have company in the
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's just awesome. I can't wait to go meet her one day. Hopefully soon. I'm sure we'll find a time for me to make my way back up to New Jersey soon enough. But let's get back in to what we're talking about right now, Teeny. So I don't know if you've been tuning in to any of the show thus far, but I'm curious your thoughts on this topic that we have in regards to the new breed of contestant that's been introduced to Survivor over the last 5 years or so. I think COVID really grew this demographic of people. I think they existed before COVID, but I think COVID hit and this pool of fans that then apply to be on the show that discovered the show exclusively through binge watching. Do you see a difference between how they play and how people like you and me who grew up with the show watching it every week play?
Yeah, definitely. I think something that I have noticed is for people like you and I who grew up watching the show week to week, who can kind of like identify the seasons of Survivor as like points in our life. Like for me, when I think about like Survivor Co Wrong, I'm like, I was like this age and this is what was going on. And I remember the discourse and I remember the players and all of that so distinctly. And I think that helps, or at least helped me going into the game to identify myself with certain play styles. Whereas I
Sure.
feel like people who watch the show in such quick succession just become obsessed with like the very outward flashiness and like big players, and they kind of just say like that's what I want to go there and do because that was the most entertaining to me in this like steamroll of me watching the show. Whereas for people like you and me, we have years to watch people play, and for the time of, as you said, like the discourse, first of all, I think watching over time allows you to become more introduced to the community around you, to the podcasts. Like you have to go out of your way to find other people who talk about Survivor, which automatically gets you more immersed in the discussions, which teaches you more about the show.
Sure.
But also I think like it's so much easier to envision a path of how you will play when you have years of watching the show and living your life in tandem with it, to relate to the players. Whereas when you watch it so quickly, you just kind of like desire to be something rather than feel the actual effects of relating to how someone plays as a season is playing out, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
No, it does. And I think, a way that you put it that I didn't really think about is you have this desire to be something. And I want to build off that point here because the way I interpret that statement is that you see something happen and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And you see the immediate cause or you see the immediate effect of that action, right? So, like, an example I used before you came on was like somebody like Parvati. You see Parvati scheme and, and flirt her way into an alliance and then throws a name out there and the episode kind of ends. And you
Hmm.
don't know what the fallout of that decision by Parvati is going to be. And when you have to spend a week to figure out that answer, I feel like there's some anxiety behind that of you're forced to think about all the ways that it could go wrong. And that informs your decision making. And even if it does end up going right, if you're somebody that, one day goes out and gets to play their self, if you have all those thoughts somewhere buried in your mind and memory of like, man, boy, this could have happened.
Yeah.
And, somebody came up to me and, online or in person and was like, hey, it could go good, but what if it goes this way? Then all those contingencies and potential outcomes are in your mind. Where I feel like if you are watching the show episode after episode, season after season, it's like, oh, how's this going to go? Oh, it went great. So if
Exactly.
if anybody tried to do that, it would go great. And I'm curious, and like we don't have to name any names unless you want to, but like, when we were playing, or just people who you know intimately in this community of former players, like how do you see their success chances versus folks like you who grew up watching the show? Like, do
Right.
you think they are behind the eight ball because of how they have indulged in the gameplay and the content of the show?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say that is an excellent point, and I think you really touched on the essence of what it is really good right there, which is just that when you watch it with weeks in between and with years to accumulate your feelings, what ultimately you gain is just like a bank of knowledge of like options that could happen, and you're also left more with like the lingering understanding of the characters who played, which I think shifts your perspective into like, I want to be a character on this show and do it my way rather than I want to do this, and this thing that this
Yeah,
person did. Um, but do I think the success rate changes? Like, I personally do believe that like it's impossible to divorce my longevity in the game from like the many years that I spent studying the game
yeah,
in all of its different ways. And I think I know Rome, for example, had watched the seasons in like a matter of 3 months before
yeah,
going on to the show, and like you said, like it was so clear he was never willing to stop. Like even when we had down days, even when we won a
yeah,
challenge, even when we lost only a reward challenge, he just wanted to be this chaotic person who was always moving the pace of the game. And even when we talked about Survivor, we would get in arguments over things that happened in the history of Survivor, because I think they lack a little bit of the nuance that it takes to be a Survivor fan. I think
sure,
over the course of watching Survivor, you're let down many times, right? Like the person you want to win doesn't win, and you're forced to understand these big truths about the game for that reason. You're forced to
mm,
understand that like the jury, this is a debatable point, but like the jury is always right, and ultimately you have to play for the jury to vote for you. Where I feel I've learned through like boot camping friends who are binging the show through the show, they have these crazy reactions. This person shouldn't have won. This person shouldn't have won. How the hell was this person so stupid? Whereas you are forced to learn a patience when you're watching the show and understand that like things don't always go the way they're supposed to go. And I think that ultimately having that mindset is incredibly helpful going into the.
yeah,
I mean, think about Andy. Like Andy couldn't be a better example of like a student of the game. And I don't know if he's able to recover and adapt so well if he doesn't have all of this years of experience watching and thinking about the show. If he had watched so quickly, gone out there, had the same day 3 experience, I don't know that he's able to tap into a part of himself that knows how to use his expertise of watching the show in the
yeah.
way that he did.
Yeah, and I think to stick with Andy as an example here, I think if Andy went out there and had the debut that he had, um, and it didn't have a lot of the perspective you're talking about, I think he very quickly, and I think many people would have very quickly been like, "Oh my god, this is not what I thought it was going to be." Like
Mhm.
I got to get out of here. This is a nightmare. Oh my god, like I have to go. Like yeah, vote me out. I don't care, or like I'm just going to keep crashing out and hoping that I can come out of the other side of it. But I feel like Andy being so invested into this community, and he's like the complete opposite side of the spectrum of folks we're talking about, right? Like he's showing up to watch parties by himself as a fan just to meet other Survivor
Hey,
fans. You
me
as well.
too.
You as well. So like you get that better than anybody. But like to have that perspective of being like, okay, this happens to people, right? Like I've
Mhm.
seen this happen to people. And not only have I seen this happen to people, but I've had to sit with that for a week or even months at a time before I see this person's story come full circle, if that even happens. Like, okay, people have survived something like this before. How am I going to survive it? And
Yeah.
go watch season 47 to get the answer to that question. But the important part of what I think we're talking about here is that he had that ingrained in his being. He is that big of a Survivor fan that it was like, okay, this happened. How can I use this to my advantage?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to get out of that, and not just get out of it, but thrive because of it. Like, I don't think somebody who started watching the show 5 years ago and ran through the entire series in 3 months is somebody who's going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I also think, to your point, that when you are binging the show, I think you get very attached to specific archetypes of players, or even by extension, specific players in general. Um, and I think that you're like, that's who I want to be. That's who I want to play. And if you ever catch a season where that person doesn't really exist, that archetype isn't on that season, you can kind of either just skip it entirely and be like, this season sucks, on to the next one. Or you can kind of just, turn your brain off while it's on until you get to a new season that catches your eye, where if you're growing up with it and you're watching it week to week, you're forced to be as engaged with every season and every cast, regardless of how much you
Yeah.
like it. And I think that's a big thing too. So, like, just from your perspective, can you speak a little bit to how getting attached to those archetypes, or in the inverse, like not letting yourself do that, plays into success when you're on the island?
Yeah. Something I want to bring up, and this is absolutely no shade to Annika whatsoever, but just
Yeah.
something I very much remember about the discourse around our preseason is when asked the question of like, who do you think you'll play the most like, or who's a winner that you'll play the most like, and who you won't, she named like Sarah Lucina and like Kelly Wentworth and people who archetypally maybe made big impacts on their season and were really powerful players, but who ultimately didn't have through lines in their personality types or
Yeah.
exactly who they are. And so people were kind of confused, like, what is this? What does this person think they're actually going to play like? So
Yeah.
I don't know that people who binge it actually understand the nuance of the casting process of archetype as much as they see just big scene stealing gameplay and latch on to that.
Yeah.
And what I think is different is for us who sit through all of those seasons and who are exposed to all types, like we're forced to do a lot of analysis on every kind of player. So
Sure.
for me, like Fabio was somebody who I compared myself to play with, a season that I think many people would skip or not really look into. Actually, because of the lackluster strategy on that season, it
Yeah.
kind of forced me to look more at the people and see something in him. And then ultimately that experience gave me like a blueprint of like what a winning game my personality could aspire
Sure.
to be like.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think really it just comes down to watching the show with nuance and watching the show for many years with the idea in your head of I want to go do this. Not as you're watching it for the first time realizing that you want to, if
Yeah.
that makes
Well,
sense.
so that's an interesting thing that, like, I didn't have in my notes or anything, but I think that's fascinating. The idea of like knowing that you want to do Survivor and you want to go play Survivor and building up that idea in your head before you're actually able to do it. I mean, I'm sure that you're, talking about when you were like a teenager and you weren't old enough to go apply, or you just didn't really have the place in life where you could do something like that and actually, follow through on it. But that's also fascinating. The idea of like, I watch one season of Survivor. It's, oh my God, I have to go do this,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
now I'm going to go watch the other 35 seasons or whatever. Like, but the whole time I'm like, I got to go do this, versus having to take time where it's like, I can't do this for
Yeah.
whatever reason, and realizing, in that time period of like, why can't I do this? Why am I maybe not ready to do this yet? And what things do I need to find either in the world or within myself to get to the point where I could do this? And, I also don't want to move off your point talking about how you watch Fabio and you were like, this is somebody that nobody really talks about outside of his name, and his season is very underrated or just not really discussed in the community. But because you had to sit with Fabio for 4 months straight and be hyper engaged because that was the only new Survivor content that you had access to at the time, like that game means something to you. Not even in a personal way, but just like you're familiar with it. You
Yeah.
watched it and you dissected it and you talked about it with
Mhm.
people, online and in person. And it's like, well, this like I can talk about this. This means something to me. And then when and I'm curious your perspective on this is, because it's your story, but as this Survivor thing started to become more real, and you were like, okay, maybe I could do this, and I'm getting callbacks and I'm doing interviews and this looks real, like you have a much bigger bank of players and experience to be like, where's my path, right?
Yeah.
Because very, very, very few people can be Tony. Very, very, very few people can be Parvati or Boston Rob or these Pantheon level players. But if your goal out there is to go win, which it should be for everybody, then like you got to find out what your path to win is.
Mhm.
And Fabio, I think, is a great comparison that I've never heard you say before, to be honest. The one I hear you say a lot is Ty
Yeah,
from Code
I
Wrong and from
ultimately,
Game
yeah.
Changers. But I find that fascinating because I don't think many people would want to be like, well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to be, a Fabio type player. I don't think many people would say, even though he was more beloved, I want to be a Ty like player.
Mhm.
So, like, I'm curious just for you personally, and this, can relate to what we're talking about, but it doesn't have to. What was it that made you say that? What did you realize about yourself, and what did you realize about those players that made you go into Fiji with that mindset, which was, not only did you execute on, but you were quite successful with?
Well, ultimately, I think your articulation of the experience of not being able to go on the show slash not having exactly like the story that I wanted to tell forced me to live my life in such a way where I would have a story to tell to get on the show. And so for many years in college, I knew I wanted to go on and I knew that like I needed to work up the story. And so a lot of the jobs that I did, a lot of the people I surrounded myself with were far different than like who I was and what I was actually interested in, to be able to get this breadth of personalities around me and to see how I reflected in those spaces and how I felt. And ultimately, before I did Real Survivor, another part of the community that I was exposed to, which I was only exposed to, I think, because of my many years of time that I'd put in, was this world of people who play Survivor in LRGs around the country. And I wasn't somebody who did this all the time, but an opportunity came and I took it and I went in the woods for like 5 days and I played Survivor. And I had an idea of me being a social player, but through that experience, I learned that I was an incredibly emotional player. And I had a wonderful female strategic counterpart. And I learned a lot of my strengths and my weaknesses. And so through doing that, which again, unable to be divorced from all of the years of watching the show and being a fan, I was able to get a really good picture of my play style and then go back and assess like the folks who were similar to that. And one of those was Ty. And I remember at the time watching Ty and just relating to his playfulness, relating to his sensitivities, but also the fact that everybody kind of wanted to be around him. And I don't think I had any delusions of grandeur about myself or my like potential to be ruthless. Like I think I
Yeah.
knew how I would fit in, and I think a big reason I knew how I fit in is because I had this big sociological human measurement experiment in front of me since such a young age. So
Yeah.
it all kind of plays off of each other. It's like I was watching adults interact when I was a child, which was influencing how I interacted. And then how I interacted, I was able to take to watching Survivor and say, okay, how would I be in this situation? And all of that kind of worked in tandem, and gave me such a clear perspective, for good or for bad, of who I would be, which I thought ultimately would be Ty and Mike White and Fabio. And I think I'm
Yeah.
giving myself a bit too much credit by comparing myself to Mike White. But I think there is a deep strength in the self knowledge of being able to make a really clear comparison to a player. And maybe there's also a self fulfilling prophecy in there as well,
Sure.
which could be something that like binge watchers are liberated of, because I feel like I had these very clear ideas of how I would play, and that's exactly how it went. And it didn't ultimately, it was successful in some ways, but extremely shackling in others because I couldn't break free of my emotions.
Yeah.
But that's just some long-winded exoneration of that whole experience in my mind.
No, and I think a lot of that holds true, and I think, obviously I played with you, so I got to see it firsthand, but I think it came through on TV as well, that a lot of the overlap of what a lot of the players you named, Mike White, Ty, Fabio, like what made them successful made you successful. Now, granted, in a very teeny way, I think that like you and Ty are very different people. I think you and Fabio and you and Mike White are very different people, but within the context of Survivor gameplay, like what worked for them clearly worked for you. And again, like these are players that like ultimately are not very talked about players. Like if Mike White wasn't Ned Schneebly in School of Rock and wasn't on top of the world with White Lotus right now, if he was just a regular guy, I don't think many people would be talking about Mike White like they do. And yet he was so successful, and yet Fabio won, and yet Ty was so successful. And again, I think a lot of that is just you have a much more personal connections and deeper memories of these
Yeah.
more under the radar but successful players when they're the only new Survivor that you can watch week to week, month to month. And then these very successful examples that we're using, when their season ends, you then have to spend months with them. And they're at the peak of conversation for months until the new cast starts to get leaked. And even then, like people are dissecting Fabio's win for months. People are talking about why Ty and Mike White didn't win for months. And that discussion, like you hold things, even things you don't think you held on to, they're in there somewhere because it matters so much to you. And you're dealing with it for so long. So I think that's just fascinating. We're getting close to the end here. But before I let you go, I do want to talk a little Survivor 50. All the guests we've had here on the Survivor After Show, we've gotten their takes on 50. So we don't have to go too deep unless you want to. But I think that this is a good segue. I don't know how your season only has one representative. Should have had Andy, Sam, Saul, or Teeny, in my opinion. I'm assuming he forgot to put my name in there, which is totally cool. Don't worry. I understand. It's an easy one to forget. But like just generally, right? Up from when the cast got leaked up until now, how do you think they're handling season 50? What do you make of the casting? What do you make of the theme? What do you make of the branding? Just give me your kind of general take on Survivor 50 up to this point.
So I think to pull it into the theme of this show, I feel as though from the new era onward, I have really just tried to be as like removed from my personal preference about what they'll do, and so everything always feels like at a kind of neutrality to me. I am not surprised by this or super enraged by this. I think most of what the comic consensus is, I agree with, in that it's not a fair splash of people across 50 seasons at all.
Sure.
And the new era decision seems bunko as hell. Like why are there 6 people from the past 2 seasons? Why is Jonathan the only representative from 41 to 44? Obviously that's not a choice that I would ever make.
What was that word you used to describe it?
Bunko.
Bunko? What? And for people who may not be familiar with bunko, can you give us a definition?
That's like a callback. One of my friends used to say that, just like absolutely crazy, just nuts.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think the thing is, though, for me, there's enough. There is enough for me to be excited to see.
Sure.
I also think that I always have taken an enjoyment in just like a returning season, especially even with wild cards, because like there's some perverse entertainment that I get out of like these people either like needing to prove themselves to us so hard because we're so disappointed that they're on it, or crashing and failing and we're all like, haha. Like there's something like perversely enjoyable about that to me. But ultimately everything that I feel, everything that I think is completely shrouded in like a horse blinding need for Genevieve to succeed and do well. So it really makes it hard for me to root for people that I otherwise would have really been rooting for, or root against people who I think could potentially be helping her out there right now. And that's an interesting layer to being an alumni and having someone you really care about play.
Yeah, and for everybody watching right now, we're at 94 viewers, which is the most we've ever had on an episode of Gabe's Big Move through 4 episodes. I'll give you the tea. and this is not tea that should have been hard to decipher yourself. Everybody on season 47 is rooting for Genevieve. It's the only thing I care about. I'll give you my takes on season 50, on this show, on other shows, whatever. But the only thing I deeply, truly care about that keeps me up at night, that will move my emotional perception of Survivor, is Genevieve winning. It's the only thing I actually care about. My whole take, whenever anybody asks me, like, what do you think of 50? My first answer every time is Genevieve, kill them all. I want to see Genevieve kill everybody out there. And I think she's in a really good starting spot to do it, to be honest with you. And I know she's out there playing hard as hell right now. And I'm curious what you think about this. For me, I love that if it wasn't going to be a bunch of us on there, that it's just one of us. Because all of us, all of our energy, all of our emotion, everything can just be poured into hoping and praying and rooting and supporting this one person. And it's like, as a solo representative, I couldn't pick anybody better than Genevieve to do it. I think you would agree with that. But like, I don't know, just talk a little bit about how it feels to have just one person from our season be the representative on what's supposed to be the biggest season of Survivor ever.
Well, obviously it's a little confusing because obviously I couldn't be more biased, but I think the common consensus is that 47 is the best of the new era, and that there are multiple people from our season who are incredibly deserving. But given how it has played out and what the cast does look like, I think it's better for some people to not be back for this season. And I think if there is one person who can thrive in this environment and who it makes it more beneficial, as you said, for her to be alone, it's Genevieve. And like, I felt it 20 minutes after the Kishan vote happened. I am playing with an all-time great thinker in this game. I am playing with somebody who is so incredibly, capable, just intelligent, just able to think through scenarios in such a brilliant way and see the game board in a way that like I personally just never can. And two, just so freaking compelling. And so I have such a deep sense of faith and belief in Genevieve's ability to play this game and to connect with these people. And her, like, listen, not to throw a stray at Corey Wurtenberger, but I did go on his Twitch stream and he said the thing working against her is her aura. But like, we have been in the game with that aura. It pulls you in, and before you, like, even when you know it, it's too late. It's too late. And I think it makes it, I thanked her before she left for like, we're already a very close cast, a very close group of people. But like, this will bring us all closer. And I'm glad that she gets to have a unified support system without the layers of, playing with somebody who she already played with. Like, I think that's going to make it easier for her as well. And I couldn't be more excited. I can like feel in my heart that she's still there. And it's insane.
I feel a bit of wind at my back, and I know it's Genevieve just voted somebody out, or Genevieve just found an idol, or Genevieve just won a challenge. Like, I just, you feel it. And like, to Wurtenberger's point of like her aura is working against her. Like, I think that there are so many things in the early game that are working against other people that she doesn't have to deal with. Like the fact that she isn't really this screen time monster like Q is, for example. Like, that Q is going to have a camera in his face for every single second that he's there, and not that should be a motivating factor for how you play, but it's part of it. And people are going to say, like, I'm not coming out here to not be on TV, and I don't think Genevieve is not this big bombastic personality that's full of catchphrases and everything. Like, what makes her compelling is her gameplay and her thought process and her ability to articulate that. It's not because she's, like a meme like Q is, no disrespect to Q, but he's kind of a meme character, and I think that there are a lot of other people who fall into that category that made it onto season 50. She's also not a bona fide legend like Suri is, and like some of these other
kinda though.
Well, but you know what
I
I
know what
mean.
you mean, but
Like, she's not Suri, and I say that with all the love in the world, but it's like, she ain't that. I don't think that she has been around enough for even other one-time players like a Christian Hubicki or an Angelina to like have the myth that exists behind players like that. And I think that helps her. And I think the number one thing that helps her that we've already talked about is the fact that she's alone out there. People are going to look at Kyle, Camilla, and Joe, and they're going to say, one of them's got to go now, right? People are going to look at Q, Tiffany, and Charlie and say, one of them's got to go now. I think they'll say something similar about Christian, Angelina, and Mike White. And I think people are going to look at Genevieve as somebody who can be scooped up, not somebody that should be targeted. Because if they have to go against one of those majorities that exist within these little pockets of cast, like they're going to need stragglers. And I think early on, Genevieve will be looked at as one of those stragglers. And the beauty of it is they don't know that they're inviting a cobra into the house with them. And by the time she's in there, like you said, it's too late. Then she's got her hooks sunk into people. She's got plans, long-term plans and short-term plans on how she's going to turn this alliance on its head and how she's going to be sitting at the end, how she's going to be in the final five or wherever. And like that, I think is all set up great for her. I don't think people are going to be thinking about her aura. To me, that sounds like a fan perspective. That's a fan take.
Well, I also think there's something that gets asked in every preseason interview, which is what's your greatest strength and what's your greatest weakness? And so many people say, my greatest strength is my greatest weakness and it's my social game. I'm going to be really good at the social game, but then people are going to see that and then it's going to, well, then no, you're not good at the social game. If people see that too much, then no, you're not good at the social game. Like if the social game is what gets you out, then that's not your greatest strength.
Yeah.
Genevieve's aura is truly her greatest strength because it isn't like, it's as you said, like it's not going to be so eminently clear and threatening in the beginning. And yeah, I think she's going to just know she's going to know who to work with and she's going to know how to fit in. She's going to, I couldn't have more faith in somebody. And I couldn't feel that the group of people, I keep saying like, they're so lucky to be playing with Genevieve, but then again, they're not because they're going to get, as you said, killed. They're going to get killed by the Terminator.
Well, that's the thing, is that like nobody should want to play with Genevieve. Like if you're a fan, you should want to play with Genevieve just to be in her presence and get to participate in her gameplay.
Oh, that was me.
Exactly, But if you're there to win, if you're there because like I want to win Survivor, Genevieve is one of the last people you should be hoping to see walk off the boat alongside you. Like that is a disaster for anybody who wants to play because she's somebody you want to work with so bad. But she will be your demise. She will be the reason that you leave the game. She was the direct reason that I left the game, right? It was me or Genevieve, and Genevieve won that battle. And like, I'm very honored to be slain by her sword, but I wish that she wasn't there so that I could have made it further and maybe won, and that's just in a gameplay context, in a social context, in a real world context. I am so unbelievably grateful that I got to play alongside her, and now I consider her a very close personal friend of mine. So yeah, that's the consensus of everybody on 47 right now. Just as your everything you've heard me and Teeny say over the past 10 minutes or so, that's what everybody on 47 is thinking. Go kill them all, Genevieve.
I see people in the chat saying Genevieve will win. That's what we need to be saying, all of you, every day.
All the time.
Say it out loud into the universe.
Keep this energy.
It
so
works.
that
I don't want to get that woo-woo about it, but I
Yeah.
also think that fits into the theme is that for about 15 years of my life while watching the show, I thought when my brain paused for any second, one day I'm going to be out there playing Survivor. And I'm not saying I'm a believer in many things, but truly there's a manifestation that works and there's something cosmic to it. And let's put that energy into Genevieve.
All the energy we have at Gabe's Big Move is being sent to
Charlie
Genevieve.
won't win Daryl Seymour.
Yeah, sorry, Daryl. Daryl's a real one. So we allowed Daryl to speak his mind. But Charlie's not going to win. He will probably get slain by Genevieve, to be honest. I could see that happening without all the bias included. But Teeny, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a fun talk. This has been such a fun topic to talk about. And something I want to do on this show, just kind of speaking to everybody listening, is I want to tackle topics that people don't really talk about a whole lot. So, the first couple episodes were all about 48 because I started this show going into the finale of 48, and I wanted to talk about it and get my thoughts out there. But this is something I hope thrives in the off season, Last week's episode was awesome. I talked about what it means to be a villain on Survivor and went through all the different categories and tiers of the totem pole of villains that I have. It's a great episode. If you didn't watch it, you can go check it out on the Reality Aftershow YouTube channel. It's archived over there. But like hear from like Kimberly, right? If you're still watching, Kimberly, thank you so much. This is a very interesting topic. I don't believe it's been covered on any other podcast, and I've listened to a lot of these. She corrected her spelling in the following one, talking about this difference between, like what it means to be a long-term fan and what it means to be a new fan to Survivor and watching it through these binge things. So thank you so much to everybody who tuned in. I really, really appreciate all you guys. We got to 99 viewers on this, which is crazy. I'm sure the teeny bump was a huge part of that, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Twitter. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And of course, thank you to the one and only, the legend, Teeny Chirichillo. We'll be back next week, everybody. Thank you so much.